If you've ever heard someone say, "My family is Scots-Irish," and you immediately thought, "So, are they Scottish or Irish?" You're not alone. That phrase sounds simple, but it has confused people for centuries, and today it's still one of the most misunderstood identities in the English-speaking world. Because Scots-Irish doesn't just mean a Scottish person who lived in Ireland, or someone with one Scottish grandparent and one Irish grandparent. For many people, it's not even mainly about DNA. It's a label that grew out of a specific history, a chain of migrations, a religious and cultural community, and a complicated place called Ulster that sits at the heart of the whole story. So in this video, I'm going to answer 3 questions in plain English. Who are the Scots-Irish? Where did they come from? And why do people keep getting them wrong? By the end, you'll understand why the term exists, why it became popular in America, why it can mean different things in different places, and how to tell if it might connect to your own family story without turning history into stereotypes. Let's start with the simplest definition that most historians would recognize. When people say Scots-Irish, they are usually talking about a community of Protestant settlers, many with roots in Scotland and northern England, who lived in the northern part of Ireland, especially Ulster, and whose descendants later migrated in large numbers to North America. That's the heart of it. Scotland and northern England, then Ulster, then America. It's a migration story. And like most migration stories, it's messy, human, and shaped by economics, politics, and faith. Now, right away you might be thinking, hold on, Ireland is Ireland. What's special about Ulster? Ulster is a historic province in the north of Ireland. Today, it's associated with Northern Ireland, but historically, it includes more counties than the modern political border. And that detail matters, because when people talk about Ulster Scots or Scots-Irish, they're usually pointing to that northern region where a major change happened in the 1600s. This is where the story starts to feel like a puzzle. In the early 1600s, the English crown encouraged an organized settlement in parts of Ulster. This period is often connected to what's called the Plantation of Ulster. The word plantation here doesn't mean crops, it means planting communities, moving groups of settlers into an area to reshape control, land ownership, and society. Thousands of people moved into Ulster from Scotland and England. Many of them were Presbyterians from Scotland, along with other Protestants, and they formed new towns, churches, and farming communities. And this is one major reason the term Scots-Irish can feel confusing today, because you're dealing with people who might have Scottish roots, but lived in Ireland, and then moved again. So when their descendants show up in America, what do you call them? In Ireland and the UK, you might hear Ulster Scots. In America, you often hear Scots-Irish. Sometimes families just said Irish, especially because they were leaving from Ireland. Other times they said Scottish, because that was their older identity. The label changed depending on where they were standing, who was asking, and what time period you're talking about. So let's zoom in on the first migration, Scotland to Ulster. Why did people leave Scotland for Ireland in the first place? Some moved because of opportunity. Land and leases, the chance to build a new life, and the pressure of crowded conditions back home. Others moved for religious and political reasons, because those were turbulent times. Scotland and England were full of conflict and change. Crown power, church power, and local stability were constantly shifting. But here's what's important to understand. These were not all identical families moving for one neat reason on one specific date. This happened over decades. Different waves, different circumstances, different counties, different outcomes. Many settled, worked, built lives, and became part of Ulster's developing culture. Then came the second migration, the one that shaped the American story. Because a huge number of these Ulster communities later left Ireland and went to the American colonies, especially during the 1700s. Why? Again, not one reason, many. Economic pressure was a big one. Rent and land insecurity were common complaints, especially for tenants. Trade restrictions and political limitations mattered too. Religious tensions didn't disappear. And for many families, the question became simple and brutal. Can we build a stable future here, or do we need to move again? So a lot of people moved again. Think about that for a second. For many Scots-Irish families, migration wasn't a one-time adventure. It was a pattern across generations. Scotland to Ulster, Ulster to America. And in America, many didn't settle in the richest coastal cities. Large numbers moved inland, into the backcountry and frontier regions. Over time, Scots-Irish heritage became strongly associated with places like Pennsylvania's frontier, the Shenandoah Valley, and the Appalachian backcountry. This is where another misunderstanding often sneaks in. People sometimes hear Scots-Irish and jump to stereotypes about temperament, politics, or behavior. But a real community is always more diverse than the cliché version. Yes, certain settlement patterns happened. Yes, church networks mattered. Yes, frontier life shaped culture. But not every Scots-Irish family lived the same way, believed the same things, or ended up in the same places. Some stayed in towns, some became merchants, some moved multiple times within America. Some blended with other communities quickly, and many intermarried with English, German, Irish, and other groups. So when you hear Scots-Irish, don't think a single personality type. Think a historical migration community that became very large and influential. Now let's tackle the biggest reason this identity is misunderstood, the name itself. Scots-Irish sounds like a mixed ancestry label, like Italian-American or Mexican-American, where the parts tell you exactly what you need to know. But Scots-Irish is more complicated, because it's often describing a community's history in a particular place, Ulster, and how they were seen and how they saw themselves. In the United States, the term became especially useful because it separated a Protestant Ulster background from other Irish immigration that happened later, especially in the 1800s, when many Irish Catholic immigrants arrived due to poverty, discrimination, and the catastrophe of the Great Famine. So for some Americans, Scots-Irish became a way of saying, my family came from Ireland, but we weren't part of that later wave. That doesn't make one group better than another, but it does explain why the label took hold. It was a social identifier. And that leads to misunderstanding number one. Misunderstanding number one. Scots-Irish means half Scottish and half Irish, not necessarily. Some people truly do have a blended family story like that. But historically, Scots-Irish is often describing people of Scottish and Northern English roots who lived in Ulster and then migrated onward. It's not a math equation, it's a historical pathway. Misunderstanding number two. Scots-Irish are just Irish. Sometimes, yes, depending on what you mean by Irish. If you mean they lived in Ireland, that's true. If you mean citizenship in later periods, it depends on the time. If you mean culture, language, religion, and identity, that's where it gets complex. Some Scots-Irish descendants in America strongly identify as Irish because that's the island their ancestors left. Others emphasize the Scottish part because of older roots. Others identify as Ulster Scots. Others simply say American and don't think about the label until someone asks. So the answer is, it depends on the person and the context, and that's exactly why the term is misunderstood. People want it to be one clear box, and it isn't. Misunderstanding number three. Scots-Irish were all the same. No community that large is all the same. They came from different areas, they lived through different decades, they had different levels of wealth, different relationships with neighbors, different experiences of conflict and opportunity. Even within Ulster, there were differences between counties and towns, between rural and urban life, between families who thrived and families who struggled. Misunderstanding number four. This is just ancestry trivia. It's actually a major piece of the story of the Atlantic world. The Scots-Irish migration helped shape settlement patterns in early America. It influenced church life, local politics, and community networks across large regions. And it remains a living identity for many people today, whether they use the label or not. Now let's slow down and address a question that comes up all the time. How can you tell if Scots-Irish might apply in your own family story? First, a quick reminder. Family history is not always clean. People moved, names changed spelling, stories got simplified, records can be incomplete, and identity labels can shift over time. So instead of proof, think in terms of clues. One clue is geography. Do you have ancestors who arrived early in America and settled in places commonly linked to Ulster migration patterns? Parts of Pennsylvania, Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, the Carolinas, the Appalachian backcountry, Tennessee, Kentucky? Another clue is church tradition. Many Scots-Irish communities have strong ties to Presbyterian churches. That doesn't mean every Presbyterian is Scots-Irish, and it doesn't mean every Scots-Irish family stayed Presbyterian. But if you see Presbyterian records, that can be a meaningful lead. Another clue is older family language. Did relatives say things like, "We're from Ulster," or Northern Irish, or Scotch-Irish, or Irish but not like that, which is a phrase that sometimes appears in older American storytelling? Even those phrases can be messy, but they can hint at how a family identified. Another clue is migration timing. A large wave of Ulster migration to America happened in the 1700s, so if your family arrived in the mid-1800s, they might be part of the later Irish immigration wave, rather than Scots-Irish. But again, there are exceptions. And one more clue is surnames. But this is where people make mistakes. Yes, there are surnames that appear often in Ulster Scots communities. But surnames travel. A surname alone doesn't prove identity. It's a starting point, not a verdict. If you want a simple and honest approach, here's the best way to think about it. Scots-Irish isn't one surname, one look, one personality, or one DNA percentage. It's a historical path that shows up through records, regions, and community ties. Now let's talk about the modern argument, because you've probably seen it online. Why do people still fight about this label? Because identity is emotional and history is political. In Ireland and the UK, the label can intersect with the complex history of Ulster, sectarian division, and the modern political reality of Northern Ireland. People may hear Scots-Irish or Ulster Scots and immediately connect it to modern debates about identity, belonging, and history. In America, the term can become a badge of heritage, something people use to explain family culture, pride, or regional identity. And sometimes it can be used in ways that flatten other histories, which causes understandable pushback. So if you're trying to understand this topic, the goal isn't to win an identity argument. The goal is accuracy and empathy. Accuracy means admitting the term changes meaning depending on place and time. Empathy means remembering that real families lived these migrations, often under pressure, often with fear, often with hopes they couldn't fully control. So what's the best one-sentence truth about the Scots-Irish? Here it is. The Scots-Irish are a historical community shaped by two big migrations, Scotland and Northern England to Ulster, and then Ulster to North America. And the label reflects that history more than a simple ancestry mix. If you take nothing else from this video, take that. Now, before we wrap up, let's do one final quick myth check. If you hear Scots-Irish, don't automatically translate it as half Scottish and half Irish. Don't assume it's identical to Irish, even if the ancestors left from Ireland. Don't turn it into a stereotype. And don't dismiss it as trivia, because it's part of a much bigger story of migration, identity, and how labels are created and reused. And here's a thought that might surprise you. The confusion is not a modern mistake. The confusion is built into the history. People have been negotiating what to call themselves for hundreds of years, because borders, governments, and communities changed around them. So the next time someone says, "I'm Scots-Irish," you'll know what they might mean. They might mean a Scottish-rooted community in Ulster. They might mean an Ulster Protestant heritage. They might mean an American family story tied to early frontier migration. Or they might just mean, "My family story is complicated, and this is the word I grew up hearing." And all of those meanings tell you something. If you want, I can make a follow-up video that goes even deeper in a practical way. Like the most common migration routes from Ulster to America, the regions where Ulster Scots communities were strongest, and how to approach surnames in church records without falling into the one clue equals proof trap. If that sounds useful, hit like, subscribe, and comment one thing. Have you heard your family use the term Scots-Irish, Ulster, or Northern Irish? And what did it mean in your home?